Haven't really thought about slaughterhouses since Upton Sinclair's The Jungle? That's what it feels like. And yet the nation's slaughterhouses are allowed to operate almost secretly. That's why PETA is monitoring the monitors. Next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, slaughterhouses. It's amazing we know anything about them at all. The meat industry prefers to shroud its activities from public view. Some regulation, some with its FSIS, the Food Safety and Inspection Service. It might as well be a secret service. That's because rarely do they alert law enforcement of egregious violations that can include botched stunning of animals who then are exposed to real pain. The FSIS reports are released, just not in real time, and they don't do a whole lot of good. Fortunately, PETA monitors the monitors and sends cases to law enforcement. It matters to the animals. Colin Henstock, Assistant Manager of Investigations for PETA, says despite being all written reports, even without video, the instances in the reports are painful to read. Here's my conversation with PETA's Colin Henstock, the person in charge of calling out slaughterhouse abuses, on the PETA Podcast. Colin, tell me, what is it that, in terms of slaughterhouses, you're a monitor of slaughterhouses. Now, how does that work? You monitor the reports by the feds on the slaughterhouses?
That's right. The Food Safety and Inspection Service is the branch of the USDA that has inspectors in slaughterhouses. And every few weeks, they release batches of humane handling violations at slaughterhouses. And those reports I will review, we'll look through for potential violations of state criminal law. And if there's an example in there that we think violates state law, we will reach out to the authorities in the jurisdiction where the slaughterhouse is located and ask that they investigate what happened there as well.
All right, so this is not necessarily in real time. You're getting the reports after it's issued by the FSIS, which is, it's not really a secret agency. It's sort of like the monitor. They're the monitor of the slaughterhouses.
That's right. Yeah, we're usually a few weeks behind. They'll release their reports, and the incidents are usually at least a couple weeks old. Yeah. The really disappointing thing is that the local authorities will have no clue that this incident happened whatsoever.
Right. And the other thing that's strange is that, it's not happening in real time. The monitors they're from the FDA. They've seen it. They put in these papers. You get it 2 weeks later. Now you're monitoring the monitors.
That's right. Yeah, we take what they've compiled and we draft our own complaint based on that and cite their report. And that's what we pass along to the local authorities.
Well, wait a minute. If you're monitoring the monitors, how well are the monitors at catching the stuff that should be monitored?
Well, the inspectors in the plants, they're not always in the location where the violations are happening. They circulate through the plants. So they're not catching everything that happens in the plants. And when they do, they'll often issue a suspension, which is they will withdraw inspectors from the plant, and it basically stops the plant's production for a brief time until the plant assures them that it won't happen again. But we find that they often do happen again over and over and over.
Well, that sounds like a really heavy wrist slap. I mean, It doesn't sound like it's very punitive at all. And so if the monitors are going all over the place and they're monitoring stuff, you're getting it 2 weeks later, and you're monitoring the monitors. How bad are they doing? Are they catching everything? Are they catching the most egregious, or are a lot of things slipping by?
Well, they do catch some really egregious, horrible conduct, but they don't see everything. The suspensions can be as short as under a day. So I mean, especially with larger slaughterhouses as well too. So you really do wonder how much of a deterrent it is if they just have to go through a quick regulatory process and then just ramp right back up again.
Yeah. So if it's really egregious, or if some things are really egregious that you've seen, describe for our listeners just how egregious is egregious.
Well, a lot of the violations are botched stunning attempts. So on animals, there are specific spots on their heads where a single shot should render them unconscious. And we see all the time animals shot half a dozen times or more who are still standing, still conscious, crying out, bleeding profusely. And that's probably the most common violation, but they really do range such a gamut. I mean, we looked into or we requested that authorities investigate a slaughterhouse in Washington where a calf was found skinned in a pile of dead calves and was still alive and conscious and blinking and vocalizing. And the inspector just happened to find this calf laying there. So it's really just a horror show in these government reports.
Oh, how does that happen where you have an animal that should have been stunned is now in a pile of dead calves and still alive? Is that like, are they going too fast? Are they just not paying attention, the workers at these slaughterhouses?
They can go too fast. They can aim at the wrong part of the head. They can have the wrong caliber for that type of animal. We've seen violations where they've had to not only leave the room to look for more ammunition. There was actually one violation where an employee had to drive home to get a higher caliber of bullet to shoot an animal who they had shot repeatedly and was just still conscious and wounded there. So there's it's an awful industry that's violently killing sensitive animals, and it's a sloppy business quite a bit of the time.
So when you talk about these stunnings that go wrong, I mean, it's not just an oops, the animal's moved, I aimed wrong. Sometimes it's wrong tool, need a bit. And I guess it's bullets, they shoot them in the head, or it's not just a stunning where it's like a physical force thing, but I guess it could be like a rubber bullet or something like that.
There can be a variety. There's captive bolt guns, which shoot a bolt out in animals' heads. Those are used quite a bit, especially in smaller. It could just be like a .22 rifle or even a handgun. And we also do see in facilities that use electrical things, they'll shock the animals into unconsciousness. We even see that fail. We have seen reports of animals having to be electrocuted over and over and over again, or animals who have been rendered unconscious, but then regain conscious when they're hoisted and hanging on the line where their throats are cut.
Now, the stunning is really a stunning. It's not a killing. You're not killing them with bullets that are like, you're just knocking them out, right? I mean, that's the thing. And are they they're just screwing that up, the workers or the slaughterhouse people?
Well, the process would be they would be stunned either with the electrical or a shot to the head. Then they would be hoisted by their back legs, and then their throats would be cut while they're hanging on a line. And that's what would actually kill them at that point. But even then, we've seen violations where animals' throats have been cut and they are still conscious and vocalizing and trying to right themselves while they're hanging upside down. It's a lot of really terrible things that happen in these reports.
Well, what are the laws? What do the laws say? I mean, certainly if you're in the slaughterhouse and you've made a mistake and you're slicing the neck of a live animal, that shouldn't happen. Aren't they able to just stop things right there and then and say, look, stop the plant. We can't go on. We got to fix this. Or does it just go on, and if someone sees it, it'll be mentioned and the FSIS will catch it and put it in that report?
Yeah, well, if FSIS sees it, they can issue a suspension then. And they also do have the authority to refer it for criminal charges. But we only know of a couple of instances where that's ever happened. And these violations are happening multiple per month, we see in these reports. So for the most part, the vast majority of times, almost every single time, nothing criminal-wise happens. It's just a quick regulatory process to have the slaughterhouse tweak a couple of things and then get right back to business as usual.
Or maybe slow down the pace, or maybe give them better equipment so that they're not misstunning animals, or
we've seen where some employees have been moved off of the kill floor or have been retrained on proper placement of shots and things like that.
Yeah. It just strikes me odd. Now, these reports are all the slaughterhouses in the country, right? I mean, they monitor from coast to coast, the FSIS, right?
They monitor every slaughterhouse that will sell between states. And that's, I believe it's somewhere around 850. And there are states that have meat inspection and have very similar programs to FSIS as well, just for meat that will be sold within the state.
So interstate, but not all interstate meat traffic meat. Those slaughterhouses will have the FSIS or the FDA inspectors and the monitor. That's a lot of meat, though, I'd imagine. But that also means you mentioned the intrastate, the within the state. Some of those cases don't get monitored, right?
Well, if they are monitored, there's really not the same sort of program to release reports in the way that FSIS does. So, if we do get information from a state, it would have to be through records requests and things like that, and would be quite old by the time, we were able to look at it.
Or a whistleblower would come forward and say, I saw this and something, happened in this plant. So given those parameters of how information is collected, boy, we're not really seeing, we're seeing just maybe a fraction of the kinds of bad things that happen in slaughterhouses.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, these inspectors are rotating constantly. They're not seeing anything. We've actually seen in some reports where employees have tried to block their path when they know that a violation is happening. They try to distract the inspectors. We've seen an employee, whenever he was called out by an inspector, he began cursing at the inspector and was basically being held back by other employees. So there's a lot that goes on there that, even with these reports, no one will ever know.
And these are written reports, not videos or anything like that, or there's no multimedia. It's just a written report by an inspector who happened to catch it or see it, right?
That's right. Yeah.
No pictures, no. So just the written description, you read them, and almost all of them should rise to some level of violation of something. No?
Well, there are some states that have exemptions for conduct relating to agricultural activities or farm animals. So you can read a cruelty statute that prohibits treating an animal cruelly, beating, torturing, maiming, and then you could see where there's an exemption where it says none of this applies to agricultural activities. So unfortunately, they're not all potentially a state violation, but the ones that definitely are and are very apparently in violation of the state criminal statutes, those are the ones that we'll send to the local authorities.
Well, give me a success story of something that you saw that was so egregious in one of these reports from the monitors. You're monitoring them. You see it. It's a red flag. It should already be red flagged, since the monitors caught it. But what's an example of here's a situation, and then you went to the authorities, and what did they do?
Well, quite a few of these are still under investigation, and they almost always spark some really strong interest from the officials that we contact. One slaughterhouse, Puget Sound Processing in Washington, was found to have acted inhumanely by the Washington Department of Agriculture after we contacted them. And they received a warning and a warning of a fine or 90 days in jail if another violation happened. And that was after they racked up 4 violations in a year for botched stunning attempts. There was another slaughterhouse in Hawaii, Kulana Foods. We wrote to local officials there after they dragged a pig off of a truck and across the floor. And it got a lot of interest in Hawaii, and they actually ceased the slaughter of pigs and other small animals there after that, because apparently they just weren't able to do it within the law.
Yeah, is it? But this is fairly typical all across the United States, and is, in your opinion, just looking at the way things are monitored, are you getting all the information you need, or do we have really a full picture of how things are operating in our slaughterhouses?
No, we definitely don't. And with the current laws being changed for pig slaughterhouses that removed speed limits for the lines at pig slaughterhouses and removed some of the regulatory checks that were in place there, these are just a tiny snapshot of the animal agriculture industry in this country. And, a lot of these slaughterhouses are actually in small towns where, people go about their daily lives and drive past these big blocky buildings, and they have no idea what's actually happening inside. So a major part of why we want to do this is to just let the general public know this was one animal's ordeal in this slaughterhouse. And, even if they were following everything to the letter of the law, it's awful. But here's the story of what one animal endured at that slaughterhouse.
And if you catch, well, it's been caught because it's been monitored. You go to the law enforcement, and then the full, effect of the law comes down on the company. What kind of penalty is that? And is it severe enough? Or does it speak to the sense that maybe we need tougher penalties?
Most of the time it's misdemeanors under state law for what we're asking the prosecutor to look at. But it's definitely not enough. I mean, and some of the violations, they go on for extended periods of time where, a severely wounded animal is conscious and crying out. And it really just pales in comparison to what the animal went through, a misdemeanor charge.
And yet, because these monitor reports are monitored by PETA, rarely does it get the scrutiny? Rarely does it reach the media. Rarely does it get any kind of attention. I'm looking at an article that was in the Lynchburg News Advance. Kill floor operations at Seven Hills Food Company briefly halted after federal enforcement actions. And, it talks about how an animal was ineffectively stunned and shackled, which is what, the botch stunning that you were talking about. But when it makes news, people care. It's just that it's not seemingly getting out to the public.
That's right. We've gotten 170 stories on our requests that local authorities investigate and charge anyone found to have violated state law. So that's, as I was saying, that's a big component of this is getting it out there to the public. I mean, given that the law will never really be adequate to thoroughly charge someone for what this animal went through, public education is really vital.
And so now that we're getting some of that information out there, people can go to PETA.org and find out about these slaughterhouse abuses. I mean, a lot of people, I suppose, if they're vegan or vegetarian already, they think they're doing all they can. But what can people do to try to stop these slaughterhouses?
I mean, activists are out there every day trying to figure out exactly how to go about doing that. I mean, it's definitely going vegan is the way to stop this industry ultimately. I mean, even the best regulated places, even places that have put humane claims all over their products, we see them with violations that will just turn your stomach when you're reading them.
Well, wait a minute now. You mean people who claim in marketing materials that, we're kind to our animals, or these are farm friendly tactics that we use, or animal friendly methods. That's just marketing. Don't believe it.
It's absolutely just marketing.
And how describe? Do you have an example of something that you've seen that?
Well, we've seen even mobile slaughter units, which are basically they bring the slaughterhouse to the farm to avoid transporting animals, which is extremely stressful on animals to be transported on transport trucks. Right. In these operations will rack up violations. They'll, have shot a cow in the head half a dozen times before the animal loses consciousness or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like, we've been, activists have been fighting against slaughterhouses since Upton Sinclair, right? I mean, it's been decades, and the industry doesn't seem to move toward a more humane way of doing things. Is it something that might require Congress or might require, state legislation? What do you think, Colin?
Well, I do think that as long as people are buying these products, this sort of conduct is going to happen. There's no way around violations and animals dying these really drawn out, protracted deaths, even in the places that are run exactly as the law says that they should be. So really, I mean, I think individual choice does really come down to it.
And how much of your work experience, or how does, when you see these reports come to your desk and you're going through them, tell me the effect it has on you as you go through them and as you see these things time and time again?
Well, you do at times kind of recoil after reading some of these. I mean, they're very to the matter of fact, to the point reports, but they detail, this calf continued to vocalize while, blood poured from his nose. And, language like that, it is really tough to read sometimes. And you do have to take a walk sometimes after reading them, or go pet your dogs or like that to kind of distance yourself a bit from them.
Tell me, do you think that the FSIS has its heart in the right place, or are they regulators who are working really on behalf of the companies more than they are for the animals? Or do you think it's more balanced? Do you think they really are regulators?
I think they could definitely do more. I think there are some folks there whose hearts are in the right place. But as an agency, I would love to see them go a bit further in enforcing animal welfare and actually referring some of these cases for criminal prosecution themselves, so that PETA, a nonprofit, isn't doing that in their place.
I mean, that is kind of surprising that if they see it, they don't take the next step. Well, why don't they do it? Why don't they go to law enforcement? Why do they require PETA to go first?
That's a very good question. I don't really have the answer to that. It's dismaying to think that an incident could happen 2 blocks away from a police station and it's never been reported to them and they would never know about it.
And so, it just goes on. There's a little red flag, but it's not that red because no one sees it until PETA monitors it. And when I say PETA monitors it, I mean specifically Colin Henstock monitors it. So that's your job, right? Yeah,
it's a big part of my job here. I mean, I talk to whistleblowers who report these same types of things from a variety of industries. I work with PETA's field investigators who are out there looking into things, specifically for us. But this is a major part of it.
Well, Colin, I really appreciate you watching the slaughterhouses on behalf of all of us out here who are concerned and really shocked to hear about the level of abuse that goes on in slaughterhouses. Do you think that people would be shocked to really know if because it seems like all of this is part of the whole animal, the whole meat and dairy, all the farm stuff is trying to be conducted under wraps so that no one really sees what really goes on. And this is the glimpse that we get. And can you imagine if we got the full look, how bad it could be?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the Paul McCartney quote of if slaughterhouses had glass walls, we'd all be vegetarian. And, we actually do see it in the news stories that these requests generate. I'll take a look at social media at where the newspaper has posted their story. And you do see the comments underneath are just filled up with members of the public who are disgusted and horrified and, had no idea that right down the road this happened.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine the comment. I have no idea it's like this. But, Colin, thanks to you and to PETA, we monitor the monitors, and the monitors aren't even all that good. And you take them to law enforcement, and I appreciate you doing that. Once again, people can go to PETA.org and find out more about slaughterhouse abuses. Colin Henstock, Assistant Manager of Investigations at PETA, thank you for being here on the PETA Podcast.
Thank you very much.
Colin Henstock, Assistant Manager of Investigations for PETA, on how slaughterhouses get by with taps on the wrist. Were it not for PETA's monitoring, see more about slaughterhouse abuses, go to PETA.org for more. And that's our show this time out. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or on amok.com, or see my work, the writing I do at the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's at aldef, AALDEF.org/blog. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. And don't forget, you can help the animals and PETA, especially if you have Amazon's Alexa. Just say, "Alexa, donate to PETA." Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.